Hello everyone. Today I am going to talk to you about some of the questionable reporting we've been receiving. So you have probably heard already by now. It's been all over Facebook and it's been all over the news, but this was on Friday and I'm recording this on Sunday. It's died down from the news now, but there was a guy who got caught sabotaging a plane in Miami and he was just arrested on, I think it was last Wednesday. So because of that, there was a lot of news articles that came out, and of course this guy had a very Islamic name, so it prompted a lot of commentary that I've seen all over. So I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna go really deep dive into this whole thing and try to figure out what's happening. And I came across some very interesting things. There is some stuff in there that it was reported by the media, so I'm not saying, you know, every single media out there reported this trying to downplay the situation, but there is a legitimate concern around if this had to do anything to do with the Islamic faith. So the official narrative around this is that this guy was upset because of the union discussions that are going on between the union and also the airplane. So because the discussions were not going fast enough for this guy, the official story that came out on Friday was that he was arrested, and when he confessed, because he did admit to doing the actual crime of sabotaging a plane, we'll get into all of that in this video, but when he was arrested, he admitted to it, so we know he did it. But he said that he did it in order to, because of the contract negotiations, he wanted to get more overtime hours, and he was upset with the way it was going because his wages were cut. So we're gonna dive into all of this today, and here we go. So first we're gonna start with what happened. So on July 17th, 2019, a gentleman by the name of Abdul Majid Maruf Ahmed Alani, and for the sake of this video, so I don't have to say this every time, I'm going to call him Abdul. So Abdul, at the Miami airport, he inserted and glued a piece of dark foam into an air data module system. So, of an airplane. So he's a mechanic there. What is an air data module system, you ask? And I'm glad you asked, because I had to nerd it up and go look at all this stuff, because I am not an airplane engineer, so all of this is foreign to me. I literally spent 2 days researching and reading on all this to understand. So here goes. It's situated in front of the aircraft, underneath where the pilots sit, and there is a pilot tube that feeds into the air data module, and it converts the air pressure into numerical information. So the pilots rely on that to know speed of plane, altitude. If there's anybody that knows about airplanes in here, feel free to correct me if I say anything that's wrong. I am not claiming to be an expert. I just researched what he tried to block on the airplane to understand if this was more part of the union, you know, what they were trying to do in the union tactics, the sabotage, cause delays and all that, or is this maybe a little bit more? Is this maybe more that's going on that we didn't know about? So here goes. I'm going to nerd it up just a little further to talk about this. So, it's going to display all of that on a primary flight display, so all that information, and that's what's in front of the pilots. So this is what they use. Now, I read that you can, as a pilot, overwrite this information or cancel it out. However, if you tamper with that specific part that Abdul tampered with, it can cause the whole air module system to kind of go rogue on the pilot, and then the pilot can't even control it himself. So very, very dangerous. You can see how. So, September 5th, this Abdul was arrested. So this was last week, and this is why we're hearing about this now. He was arrested by the FBI and the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. So this is one of the first clues that we have into this whole situation being potential terror threat, Because why would the Joint Terrorist Task Force be included in this whole investigation if there was no suspicion of terrorism? It would be like if I go to the doctor and, you know, I'm complaining of chest pain and whatever, and they diagnose me as having like pneumonia and all that. But then all of a sudden they refer me to like an obstetrician, right? Like, why would you bring an obstetrician in unless you suspect that I might either be pregnant or have something wrong with my reproductive system, right? So if you suspect I have something wrong with me, you're going to bring that doctor in. But if you're not, if you don't think there's anything wrong with that and you're dealing with something else, then you wouldn't bring them in. So the fact that the Joint Terrorist, and that was probably like the worst example I could come up with. I'm sorry guys, I suck at this kind of stuff. But anyways, because they had the Joint Terrorism Task Force in there, I'm really questioning whether or not they actually know more than they're saying. And I can understand that they can't tell us everything, but that's one of the biggest clues that we have, that there is potential Islamic terror involved in this. The first clue is obviously the guy's name, but as well the fact that the Joint Terrorism Task Force was already involved. So this is what happened. September 5th, Abdul was arrested. He actually admitted to tampering with it when he was under questioning. But there's also some video footage that shows him going to the airplane and then back within, I think, a time frame of, I think it was 7 minutes. And that is where a lot of people had identified him due to a special limp he has. So apparently he walks in a certain way. So this is how they know that it was him. And then he admitted to it. So he admitted doing this. So the official story came out with that Abdul said he did this because he was upset with the negotiations between the American airline and the union. And he thought he was going to lose money, and so he felt he needed to do overtime, so he sabotaged the plane for that. Now, is this true? Is this even a valid statement in the overall context of everything that's been happening with the negotiations? So let's take a step back, and this is going to be like ultra boring. I know, who wants to hear about union and management disputes, right? But I'm going to try to break it down as fast as I can for you so that you can move on with your day and do something else. So here goes. The union has been in dispute with the airline for quite a while now. And it's the actual union is the mechanic union. Okay, so let's go back to May 2019 just to get a bit more context on this. American Airlines is suing its own mechanics because the mechanics have been causing for a while illegal slowdown, and the mechanics were doing that in order to receive better concessions at negotiation. So the lawsuit was against the two unions, which is the Transport Work Union of America and the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Union. So aerospace workers, which is the second union. So there's two unions in there that are involved. And on June 14th, 2019, a Texas court issued a temporary restraining order against the mechanics. So there's a federal judge who told the two union representatives of the mechanics that they have to start finding their own mechanics, and if they were to cause any slowdowns, any mayhem that they can cause, they're to be fined now because of that. So mechanics, of course, worried that American Airlines is also going to outsource some of their jobs, and they don't want that to happen. So there's a lot of negotiations back and forth. At the same time that all of this is happening, there is a mass grounding across all airlines of the Boeing 737 MAX. So you've read about that, I'm sure. That Boeing had issues and everybody grounded it. According to American Airlines, the canceled flights because of the grounding of all of these mechanics should have had more time to work on all of the other planes that were in service, but yet they're experiencing large amounts of slowdown. So just to give you a reference in numbers, I'm a big number person. So 4% of flights being canceled. Now you might think, oh, that's not a lot in the grand scheme of things, but Normally it's around 1%. So Delta Airlines and any other like competitors that would be similar would experience 1% cancellation, where American Airlines had 4%. So it's huge. So just to give you an idea in terms of people affected, in June alone, there are estimates that say that it affected 1.3 million travelers because they had their flight canceled on American Airlines. Even after the June 14th order from the judge, the mechanics continue to cause mayhem. They continue to disrupt operations, and they cause delays, they cause cancellation. And this is where they're supposed to get the fines. There's a layer of infighting between these two unions, because once they reach a contract agreement, so once the negotiations are over, the union members will be expected to vote for one of the two unions to take over all of them. So there will no longer be two unions. So there's like all these extra layers of infighting. So this is really just to give you the context of everything that's going on and how Abdul comes into this and fits in. So Abdul actually claims that he's upset because of these contract negotiations, and he wanted to delay that flight. That's why he blocked that system. He wanted to delay the flight. What were the other tactics that other mechanics were doing, right? Because how come Abdul's the only guy who put a piece of foam into that system? Why did nobody else do that? He's the only one who did that. Let's look at what the tactics that were used by the other mechanics in order to delay the flights. So the tactics were very few, but they were fixing things, fixing aircrafts and stuff on the aircraft at like the worst possible time. So the most, importune, or the worst time possible. The union leaders also encouraged people to decline overtime. So remember I said Abdul said he did it because he wanted to go into overtime? Well, all the other mechanics who were also doing this, who were doing not sabotaging but delays, who were causing delays and cancellations, they were trying not to work overtime because they wanted to cause the delay. That's how you do it. When stuff goes wrong and you don't work overtime, then stuff sits there, right? So there's another tactic that they use, which is to do less field trips to work at an aircraft offsite. So that also delayed the repairs. Now, a lot of so there's also two layers. See, this is where I had to nerd it up, and I'm clearly out of my element here, but this is everything that I've learned in the past 2 days. So because when an aircraft mechanic repairs a plane, there is a sign-off that has to happen once the repair is done. And the last and third tactic they've been using is to not release that sign-off, so not signing off on it. So that means all these aircrafts that are repaired are not signed off on, so they're not in service. So this is the third tactic that's been used. Now, this is not the tactic that Abdul used. You can see he claims he wanted more overtime. He claims his salary was affected, and he actually was stating in the court documents that he was making $80,000 a year. Now, I don't know where you live, but where I live, that's a lot of money. So I don't know why, trying to sabotage a plane, how you would get more money. But anyways, it doesn't make any sense. The whole idea of him sabotaging the airplane that way, by putting that foam, doesn't add up to what the other mechanics in the union were doing. They weren't jeopardizing passengers' lives, right? They weren't sabotaging an actual aircraft. They were just causing delays. It's annoying, but it's not dangerous, right? Whereas what Abdul did is a full-on dangerous situation. So now that we know what Abdul did, now he's arrested. There is potential that he lied on his statement of why he did this, but let's dig a little bit deeper into him. So he actually used to work at the same time as he worked for American Airlines for another company called Alaska Airlines. And Alaska Airlines ended up firing him. And it's very interesting. it's very, very interesting to see why he was fired. So let's go over this. And again, the reason we know about this, because normally employees' records aren't like out in public, but what happened is Abdul, when he got fired from Alaska Airlines, he sued them for discrimination. So he was fired for being a sucky mechanic, like not being competent enough, like making too many mechanical errors. And he sues them for discrimination. The arrogance is something else, I tell you. But let's go through this really quickly. 2005 at Alaska Airlines, he entered the wrong code in a maintenance tracking database. In 2005, again, he forgot to check required inspection items after finishing a repair. In 2007, he made the mistake of installing, when installing an altimeter, I don't know how you say that in English. In 2007, he made a mistake while installing a pilot tube, which is a sensor that helps determine the plane's speed. Now this one is especially interesting to me because after that mistake, he had to do extra training. That was part of his reprimand, you know, his punishment for that. And what does a pilot tube feed into? Well, a pilot tube actually feeds into the air data module system, which is exactly the system he tampered with on the flight in July 17th. So he did this on purpose. He tried to kill people. It wasn't a labor thing. It wasn't a union dispute. It was an attempt to assassinate everyone on board. So, okay, let's keep going on the Alaska airline firing before we get on to this. Again, in 2007, he made a mistake while sending a broken part to mechanics who were based out in Seattle. And in 2008, he installed the wrong battery on a plane. And this is the kind of like the last straw for him. This is what got him ultimately fired. That, with his history of mistakes, is what happened. So, it's interesting that the very thing he blocked, he knew it was going to cause problems. So let's look at what happens when you do block that, the air data module system. What happens when you block that? I have two examples of other flights that have crashed if the air data module system is defective, faulty, if it would have been tampered with, right? So I'm just gonna go into those two, and then that'll pretty much wrap up the video. So there was a Lion Air crash, and this was earlier, I believe it was this year. I can't remember when it actually happened, but they did release the findings. And in that one, they said there were defects reported with the that system. There was another one in Russia, and this was airline Antonov. It was flight 148, and it crashed right outside of Moscow about 30 minutes after takeoff. So, you know, in the case of this one, this Abdul, he knew that if the flight took off, it would have crashed. It would have had a good chance of crashing very shortly after takeoff. Now, how much of a disaster did we avert by finding out? It came very close. It came very close. So the crew that was on that flight, so the flight that was tampered with is it's flight 2834. So flight 2834 was tampered with, and it was making its way, it was boarded and everything, and it was making its way to the runway for takeoff. So it was taxiing, and that's when the crew found out the problem with the aircraft. So that's when they boarded the flight, and they put everybody on a second flight. But had they not found that out, it could have been a very, very tragic story. And I wonder at that point, if, assume the plane had crashed, would people be saying that this guy killed all these people because he was upset with the dispute with the union and the management at American Airlines? Would everybody be saying that, oh, he just wanted overtime? Why did none of the other mechanics tamper with things that could crash an airplane? Why is it only Abdul who tampered with something that could crash the airplane? You know what I think? And this is, again, purely just, this is my opinion. I don't have any secret sources. I don't know anything else than what I was able to research. But I know a lot about the Islamic doctrine. And I think Abdul did this on purpose with the hopes of crashing the plane in the name of Allah as a terror attack. But he used, because he was caught, he used the excuse of the ongoing dispute between union and management to kind of say, oh, to hide the fact that it was Islamic, to hide behind an existing dispute rather than saying, oh, it was in the name of Allah, because that would freak everybody else. That would freak everybody out. If you said that I've done this in the name of Allah, Allahu Akbar, everybody would freak out. But by saying, oh, I'm upset because of the union, well, it hides the fact, it hides the true intent. And this is why so many people are on social media questioning why this guy did this, if it was really because of the union. His name alone has got a lot of people thinking it's Islamic. But I think that by this video today, I've shown you that Abdul is the only guy of all of the mechanics who has done something to sabotage a plane and not just cause a delay. So anyways, let me know what you think. I will see everybody in the next one.